At 02:01 hours local time, the first warhead struck the southern support of a railway bridge in occupied Crimea, 440 pounds of high explosive detonating against concrete and steel. The drone that carried it had crossed roughly 75 miles of hostile airspace at just 160 feet to reach this exact point. Within seconds, a full span, rail, ballast, deck, structural members, buckled and dropped into the North Crimean Canal below, and a column of pulverized concrete climbed close to 300 feet into the dark, visible for miles across the flat southern steppe. But the strike that mattered most did not happen that night. To understand why, start with the bridge. It was not a tactical target. It was a logistics artery, a rail crossing that had carried ammunition, fuel, and reinforcements into Crimea for more than 2 years, day after day, without ever taking a direct hit. Every fuel shipment, every ammunition train, every personnel transfer moving south through this corridor rolled across this single span. Knock it out, and you do not slow one convoy. You choke an entire theater's supply line at one point on a map. That is why it had survived the whole war behind layered air defense. And that is why Ukraine did not rush it. The operation began weeks earlier, and it began with patience. Members of Ukraine's Special Operations Forces resistance movement, operatives living inside occupied territory, had been watching the crossing from rotating positions along the rail line. They never counted missiles or identified radar models. They watched the rhythm. When trains ran, when lights moved, when the guard changed, fragment by fragment, a picture formed, and that picture became a target package. The Russians defending the bridge believed what defenders always believe when nothing has happened for 2 years, that the quiet meant safety. They were counting on their air defense. Ukraine was counting on something else. A bridge cannot dodge. Every warhead that slips past the last line of missiles lands exactly where it was aimed. So the plan was never to sneak one drone through. It was to send more drones than the defense could physically engage and let arithmetic do the rest. 8 drones were already loaded. 2 corridors were already plotted. And the real payoff, the reason this was built as a 2-night operation, was still hidden behind the first explosion, waiting for Russia to make one predictable mistake. The first radar to see them was a Podlet K1, a low-altitude surveillance system built for exactly this kind of threat. It scans a full 360 degrees from a mast raised above the clutter, and it is sensitive enough to catch a target with a radar signature of barely 1/10 of a square meter. An FP2 attack drone with a 6-foot wingspan sits well above that threshold. On paper, the Podlet K1 should have seen these drones more than 100 miles out. On paper. The problem was not the radar, it was the planet. Radar travels in a straight line, but the Earth curves away beneath it. Against a drone crawling at 160 feet, the horizon itself becomes a wall. The target stays hidden below the curve until it is almost on top of you. Picture standing on a beach trying to spot a swimmer's head between the waves. The ocean isn't hiding them. The curve of the water is. For the Podlet K1, that curve collapsed its 100-mile reach down to roughly 23 miles of actual warning. At the drone's speed, that was 13 minutes and 41 seconds. Not nothing, but not enough. Because seeing a drone and being cleared to shoot it are two very different things. Detection had to be handed off. The radar crew acquired the tracks, then passed them down the chain to the missile system that would actually engage, a cycle that ate 2 to 3 full minutes. It is the difference between a gatekeeper spotting an intruder and a gatekeeper who has to phone upstairs and wait for permission before anyone can act. By the time the alert reached the shooters, the 13-minute window had already narrowed to under 11. The clock was running, and the drones had not even entered the hard part of the corridor yet. That hard part was a wall of electronic noise. 20 miles from the bridge, the formation crossed into a GNSS denial zone, a Pole-21 jamming network corrupting satellite navigation across the entire final approach. This is Russia's standard answer to precision drones. Don't shoot them, blind them. Cut their link to GPS and let them wander off course on their own. Most of the FP2s shrugged it off. They were not relying on GPS alone. Inertial navigation kept them oriented by dead reckoning, and terminal cameras locked onto the bridge's silhouette in the final seconds. But one drone, the third in the lead group, had been quietly accumulating error from the moment it entered the zone. Half a degree of drift across 20 miles. It does not sound like much. It works out to about 30 feet of miss at the target, enough to slide a warhead clean off a span barely 30 feet wide. The jammer never touched the drone. It moved its aim. And here is what makes that detail matter. The Pole-21 had just done Russia's air defense a small favor, and no one down there knew it yet, because the pressure group had arrived, and this is where the trap sprang. Waiting at the crossing was a Pantsir S-1, the principal kinetic defender of the bridge, 12 ready missiles and twin 30mm cannons, a system that is genuinely dangerous and was never the weak link. Its crew acquired the first drone 5 seconds after it broke the horizon and fired a pair of missiles, 3 seconds of flight, a kill. But the second drone was already inside the engagement zone, a second and a half behind the first. The crew shifted bearing, fired again, another kill. The third, the one the jammer had nudged off course, was already drifting wide. The crew tracked and fired at it anyway, because they could not yet know it would miss on its own. Watch what just happened. 3 drones, 6 missiles gone in 40 seconds. Half the ready magazine spent, and every one of those 3 was a decoy. The pressure group carried no structural warheads. Their entire job was to look like the attack, to make the Pantsir empty its arms at the sky. The crew had just fought off the feint and burned half their ammunition doing it. And the actual strike package had not arrived. 25 seconds later, it did. 5 heavier drones came in on a converging heading from the second corridor. The structural group, the ones carrying the warheads meant for concrete. The Pantsir could track 4 targets at once. It could not clear 5. Each engagement cycle, acquire, lock, fire, assess, slew to the next, costs time, and the crew was now short on both time and missiles. They fired. 1 drone came apart. They fired again as the remaining 4 split across diverging bearings, the radar jumping between headings faster than the missiles could close. 10 missiles gone out of 12, the crew switched to guns, 4 miles of effective cannon range, 90 seconds at the drone's speed. 1 more drone shredded under fire, 3 structural FP2s crossed the gun line with 2 missiles left in the launcher and the geometry already lost. And on the bridge, the logistics train was still moving. Its cars were stretched directly across the span the surviving drones were locked onto. The operators watching the terminal feed saw it. The train clearing at 40 miles an hour, the aim point occupied. A one-way drone in its terminal dive cannot be recalled. It cannot be retasked. It holds its line and it goes. For a few seconds, the warheads and the train overlapped in the same frame, descending toward concrete that still had rolling stock on it. Then the gap opened. 8 seconds. 10. The last flat car cleared the span and rolled south into the dark. The bridge was empty, and the warheads kept coming down. The first warhead hit a connection zone on the southern support structure. 440 pounds of high explosive against concrete and reinforcing steel. The blast cracked the load path, the line of force that holds a bridge's weight and carries it down into the ground. Reinforcement bars buckled. The concrete around them spalled and sheared. A bridge does not fail where you hit it. It fails along the path the hit interrupts, and that path was now broken. The second FP2 struck an adjacent deck section a heartbeat later. On its own, either impact might have been survivable, cracked, weakened, but standing. Together they were not. The combined damage exceeded what the remaining supports could carry. Steel groaned, the deck sagged, and then one full section let go. Rail, ballast, deck, structural members, the entire span folded and dropped toward the water. Tons of concrete and twisted steel came down into the North Crimean Canal, throwing up a wall of spray and pulverized dust that swallowed the crossing whole. Where a bridge deck had spanned the canal a second earlier, there was now open air and a length of rail bent downward into nothing. The third drone, the one the jammer had pushed off course, struck the rail approach short of the water. It severed the track and scattered the sleepers across the embankment, tearing up the exact ground a logistics train had rolled over 12 seconds before. 12 seconds. That was the entire margin between a routine supply run and a train at the bottom of a canal. Then it went quiet. 5 of 8 drones had failed to reach the target. The Pantsir crew had killed 4. The jammer had accounted for a 5th. On paper, that is a defense doing its job, better than a 60% intercept rate, a number that would satisfy most evaluations. But 3 heavy warheads had gotten through, and a bridge absorbs every single one that does. One span was down. The rail was cut. The crossing that had fed Crimea for 2 years was dead. The launch cell was already gone, the site abandoned within minutes, the operators moving before the smoke had even cleared. And somewhere along the canal, the resistance watchers were still in position, still reporting. Because the first night was never the whole plan. It was the bait for the second. To reopen the corridor, Russia had to bring in heavy repair equipment by road. There was no other way. And the moment that equipment rolled up to the broken span and went to work, it would stop being a repair crew. It would become a target that could not move. Ukraine already had a second wave loaded and waiting for exactly that. 6 more FP2s from a second launch cell were already in the air the following night, crossing Crimea on a corridor the first cell had never touched. This time the defense was ready. The Podlet K-1 picked them up faster, the handoff was tighter, the Pole-21 activated earlier, and the Pantsir S-1, reloaded to a full 12 missiles, was tracking before the lead drone crossed the 20-mile mark. Everything Russia had gotten wrong on the first night, it corrected on the second. It still was not enough, and the reason was sitting on the bridge. A repair machine had been brought up to the damaged rail, its boom extended into the work zone, its hydraulic arms locked down to hold position. That is what a repair vehicle has to do to work. Commit, plant itself, lock its arms, stop being a vehicle and become a fixed point. A support truck idled 30 yards behind it, and the single-line report from the resistance cell, still watching the canal, had been enough to put 6 drones over that exact machine. The Pantsir fought well. It killed 3 of the 6. The jammer defeated a 4th, dragging it off course until its camera lost the bridge entirely and it plowed into open ground. 2 of 6 got through. A 67% intercept rate, better than the night before. But the support truck's crew had already thrown their vehicle into reverse and were pulling clear. The repair machine could not. Its boom was extended, its arms were locked, and by the time the alarm reached it, it had no time to extract. It stayed exactly where it was. The first surviving drone struck a connection between the collapsed span and the section still standing, tearing open cracks the first night had already started. The second tipped into its terminal dive with the work zone filling its camera and the repair machine dead center in the frame. It struck the same rail it had been sent to cut. The blast swept across the open ground to the machine that had not moved. Concrete and steel fragments tore through the cabin. Hydraulic fluid and diesel caught, and a column of black smoke climbed from the burning vehicle as the rail split for the second time in 2 nights. Added up, 14 FP2s across 2 nights, at roughly $50,000 each, about $700,000 in expendable airframes. For that price, Ukraine collapsed a span into the canal, severed the rail twice, and destroyed the only equipment sent to fix it. The Pantsir killed 7 of 14 drones. The jammer defeated 2 more. 9 of 14 stopped, a 64% intercept rate that would pass almost any inspection on paper. And it did not matter, because a bridge does not move, and it keeps every warhead that reaches it. Strategically, this was never about one bridge. It was about the corridor behind it. Every ammunition train, every fuel shipment, every reinforcement routed through this crossing was now stopped. Not for the hours of a raid, but for as long as it takes to rebuild a bridge under threat of the next wave. Russia still has the Pantsir. It can reload, reposition, and wait. What it cannot do is make a bridge dodge or make a repair crew invisible while it works. The defense did not fail because it was weak. It failed because it was outrun by Arithmetic, a finite magazine on the first night, a misread corridor on the second, losing the margin each time by exactly the number of warheads that carried structural explosives past the last line. You can intercept 64% of an attack and still lose everything if the target only had to be hit once. Somewhere behind the southern front, a third cell was already loading. If you found this breakdown worth your time, subscribe. We publish new drone warfare analysis every week. And here is the question worth arguing over in the comments. When a defense stops nearly 2/3 of an attack and still loses the target, is the answer more missiles, or is the age of the fixed defendable position simply over?